All right, good morning, everyone. Happy race day. Chris Terrell here with rotorpros.com as well as dfsr.com. I'm going to be breaking down, answering questions. It's been really good every week. A lot of people with questions. It's a good time to do it while you're building lineups in the morning. So we're going to discuss that, answer some questions. I'm going to go over some of my core plays, look at some of the stuff I discussed on the Rotor Pros video. If you're not a member of either site, I also have a members only cheat sheet with highlighted plays in each price range, looking at core plays, GPP plays, value plays, as well as I've started on the weeks where I can, and it's pretty much every single week, where I'm able to go in and watch practice and take some notes and then listen to the MRN radio on Sirius XM and stuff like that. Read a bunch of articles and get some practice notes on some of the drivers, just some information like that. So I've started that this week as well for members. So get over to dfsr.com or rotorpros.com. You can get a free trial right now for both sites. Come in and check out what we're about. Both sites are a little bit different. So I definitely love working for both of them, providing information when it comes to PGA, NASCAR, NHL, NFL, MLB, pretty much cover a ton of sports. But Sundays are NASCAR, so let's jump into this week. We're at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. Used to have 2 races here. As of last year, they pulled the final race of the season. They moved it to Las Vegas for the playoffs. So Las Vegas has now got 2 races. New Hampshire's just got 1. We are running the 750 horsepower package this week with brake ducts, so not a whole bunch changes. Not a lot of aero here. It's, some people call it a short track. It's an intermediate. It's a tough flat track. So what I've done this week for that, looking at flat tracks and mainly the short flat tracks, and we're going to go over and just look at that flat track performance here real quick. So what I've done is put together all the flat track races. That's Richmond, Martinsville, Phoenix, as well as New Hampshire, and go back to the start of last year. So I've got average finish. I'm actually just going to share my screen with you and just show you what I'm talking about for those that are following along, maybe haven't seen the cheat sheet yet. So just give me a second here and I will share my screen so that you can see that. No sense looking at me and my ugly mug while you can follow along on the cheat sheet and see everything. So, okay, I've got the cheat sheet up now. I'm on the flat track performance tab. This is new this week, and I just been, every single week, I've just been adding a few new things on the NASCAR side of things and the cheat sheets, just that can help us from a week-to-week basis. So this week it's the flat track performance. So like I said, Richmond, Martinsville, Phoenix, and New Hampshire, going back to the start of last year. That's a 10-race sample size, looking at these shorter flat tracks. So as you can see, Kyle Busch has been absolutely dominant. He's got 4 wins on these short tracks, 2 at Richmond, sorry, and then 2 at Phoenix. Second at New Hampshire last year, but as you can see, he's got 9 top 5s in those 10 races with those 4 wins and top 10s in all of them, 2.5 average finish. So it's just something that really sticks out to me. Morning, Rothschild. Thanks for joining. Whoa, spelling. Sorry about that. I didn't even read in the chat. Got 2 screens and about 17 tabs open and looking at my phone and trying to make sure my kid's just laying on the couch watching her Netflix show. Anyways, back to the flat tracks here. So I just wanted to really look at that because I think it's a high correlation to driving on these shorter flat tracks. Their drivers really like them because it's a driver's track. Getting away from, especially a driver like Kyle Busch, who really hates this new aero, hates this new package and stuff like that. So getting back to a track which is a driver track like this, like New Hampshire, definitely something we're going to watch. They do have PGA 1 on the track this week. For those of you, following along a little bit closer to what they're doing with the track, they're really trying to create more passing lanes because this is a tough track to pass. What we seen, the problem was, though, is once you get to that outside lane, especially in turn 3 where the bumps are, and those bumps come right in the braking zone. So as drivers are jamming the car into the entry and then slamming on the brakes, they're hitting those bumps. Very dangerous on the top side of the track. That's where we've seen, we've got 5 cars and backup cars. 5 drivers and backup cars. So Ryan Newman, he was practice 1. Denny Hamlin in practice 1 this week. They both hit the wall and they're in backup cars. And you had Alex Bowman. He broke a drive shaft in qualifying. After that, what happened? He wrecked his backup car in final practice. So they're using the 48's backup car this week. It's, I guess, going into the picks here a little bit. I've kind of jumped ahead there, just looking at some of the news and stuff. So I'm kind of jumping around. So if you have specific questions, just throw them in the chat. I'll make sure to answer all of them for sure before the video is out. But just looking at Bowman, you know, originally I was like, you know, it's dangerous because you're talking about a driver who is now in a third car, which is not even their team's car, although they're going to be pretty close between all the Hendrick cars. But they had to take so much time in swapping in the engine and changing the decals, you know, putting the wrap on the car for the 88 versus the 48, that they got no practice time. So he doesn't, you know, he was having trouble out there to begin with, and now he's in a car where he didn't have practice time. So I was really leaning on, you know, fading him a little bit, but being that his starting position is going to be, you know, at the back of the pack, 37th here this week for fantasy, you know, even a 20th to 25th place finish in that price range at 8,800, 9,900 on FanDuel, I think you got to get him in, especially on, you know, DraftKings, where you get those extra place differential points, and especially in cash games if you're playing those. I don't personally do that, but I can definitely see that this week, him being a top cash game play, just because he's starting 37th. There's very few top drivers that are showing top speed with excellent place differential this week, so keep that in mind as well. So since yesterday, I've really turned on a few drivers, and I've also picked up other few drivers. Like, I was a little down on Daniel Suarez originally. Just, you know, starting 13th seems really crazy to me for a driver like that. I don't think he's necessarily got top 5 upside, but we start looking at flat track performance. Not outstanding by any means. He does have 3 top 10s, Richmond, Phoenix, and Martinsville. So, and then one more at Martinsville. So 4 top 10s in those last 10 races. Only 1 finish outside the top 25, but starting 13th, we really need, on FanDuel, we need that 10th to 13th place finish, somewhere right in around there. And I think on DraftKings, we're going to need, you know, 5th to 8th place finish for him to really maximize, especially in GPPs where you're looking for that upside. And to be honest, he didn't really show a ton of, like, second practice. He was 20th, 15th, and 10 lap. He got up to 9th, found some extra speed in final practice. He was up at 9th, but 12th and 10 lap averages. That's not really showing me he's got a top 10 car. So I'm going to be underweight for sure. I'm definitely going to get some shares of him in there. Maybe safer than Hamlin. Are we talking about, I think we're talking about Bowman, who I was talking about there first. So yeah, Hamlin, you know, Bowman right there, that makes me like Ryan Blaney even more. I talked about him in my DFSR article. I talked about him in the Roto Pros video as well. He's starting 5th and showed top speed all weekend. Looking at practice too, he was 5th in one lap average, 2nd in 10 lap average, and then he was 1st in both in the final practice. So they got a ton of speed. They've been very up and down this season. It seems like he's either top 5 or like outside the top 20. His team's fast. They've all shown speed. Keselowski, obviously, I haven't talked to the top guys yet. I kind of started in the middle, but just kind of going where my lineup construction's taking me and the biggest decisions that I'm facing when it comes to making my lineup. So I wanted to start there with the real tough decisions. And in the middle, I think there is some tough decisions, especially because of Bowman starting 37th. And like I said, I think that's going to lower the ownership of Blaney, who showed top speed this week, especially considering, you know, I think we're going to see a lot of people, you know, Kyle Busch, Truex, Harvick's been good here. Keselowski's on the front row, showed a ton of speed. They're all been good here, good on flat tracks, as you can see, and they've all shown speed this weekend. So I think a lot of lineup construction is going to be stars and scrubs. May leave some of these middle guys out, but you're going to need, you know, if you're going like a Kyle Busch, you can grab one of these mid-tier guys, 2 of these mid-tier guys, go down a bit, and depending on how far down you do want to go, you can maybe get 2 top tier, 2 middle tier, and, you know, 2 bottom. But it really all depends on what driver you're going with. You know, not really looking at stacking or anything. I'm looking at just a combination. I'm really looking at, the overall ranking on the sheet, which is looking at my model this week, a lot of practice average. I want a fast car, obviously. I want a little bit of place differential, although it's a tough track to race at, but that gives a bump to Bowman as well as Denny Hamlin, who's starting 23rd. I got some track history here in New Hampshire because, like I said, the package is pretty similar to what we've seen here in the past. I'm looking big at the flat track averages, and then form, who's coming in hot. So just a combination of that gives me my overall ranking this week. I kind of like where it's pointing me in the right direction this week. The correlation's been fairly high this season. Just looking at, I've been doing results, so you can check this up after the races. I have to catch up on a few races behind, but I'm looking at where they finish where they finish in DK and where they finish in FanDuel points. And then I just put in a correlation just to see how my rankings work out. And I've seen as high as like 0.8, 0.85, but consistently like in the 0.6 to 0.7 range, which has been very good. Okay, I'm gonna look at a few questions here. Yeah, definitely Bowman. I think it is safer than Hamlin. He's cheaper for one. He's got 14 more place differential upside there. Hasn't shown the same speed by any means. I think Hamlin's got more upside, but I think Bowman is safer. Yes, Hamlin is starting from the back 23rd, so it's definitely, I like Hamlin's upside because of the speed that he's shown in practice, but he's also, like I said, in first practice, he went to a backup car, and that's kind of why he qualified 23rd, which I was happy about because he's in that backup car. You know, if he would have qualified top 10, it would have been a lot harder decision, but I'm not worried about him moving through the field. If it was a lower driver that's maybe not on a top team, say like a Stenhouse or a Buescher or an Austin Dillon, guys like that are, you know, starting 23rd for fantasy, but starting from the rear of the field, I'm probably going to fade those guys. But when it comes to Denny Hamlin, even Ryan Newman, who also went to a backup car in opening practice, starting 26th, I think it's, you know, with Bowman starting 37th, I think that's going to lower the ownership of guys like Hamlin and Newman starting from the back. And I love that for GPP. If I can get a guy that's, you know, that has a top 10 car, aka Hamlin, starting 23rd, people are going to fade him because he's starting from the back of the pack. So he's starting with, you know, if he goes back to say 36th, and they go to the back of the pack, you know, don't get confused when you're watching the start of the race. When they're doing their opening lap, get out on the track, those pace laps, that's when they fall to the back. So keep that in mind. So yeah, he's going to start with like a minus 13 place differential. I think a lot of people are going to get away from that. Even Newman as well, 26, because he hasn't shown as much speed, but I think he's got top 20 upside as well. He's good on the flat tracks. Let's go look at both of them actually right now. So we've got Hamlin. He's got top fives in all three flat tracks this season, Richmond, Martinsville, and Phoenix. He's got 6 top fives. So all of his top 10s are top fives in the last 10 races. So I definitely like that. 4th best average finish in that 10 race span. And then we want to go find Newman. Okay, so Newman's a little bit cheaper, but he is 12th in average finish on those tracks. He's got 2 top 10s in the last 5, 12th or better in the last 4, top 15s, going all the way back to New Hampshire where he was 6th last year. So he's been good here, I think. So him starting 26th with the speed that he showed, I think he's probably around a 18th to 21st place car with upside. I think that's kind of his floor this week. He's a veteran driver. He's good on the flat tracks. He's good on the short tracks. So I just have confidence in those experienced drivers on these tough tracks to get up front. And if he's going to be lower owned because of the Alex Bowman place differential upside there, the elite place differential upside, I definitely like going to Newman and Hamlin in that situation. I've heard some people, you know, want to fade him and in their shows, but I kind of look at that as just something I target for GPPs to get some of that low ownership. Put Hamlin with Kyle Busch, who might be one of the highest owned drivers this week, and maybe differentiating a little bit with some of those GPP pivots. That's kind of important why I want to do this show, as I like to pay attention to other people's articles and stuff after mine are already out, of course, because I want to get a feel where the industry's at and where other sites are pushing their customers for when it comes to, you know, trying to plan out what ownership's going to look like during the race. So I think it's very important to be able to do that. Some other notes, yeah, William Byron's going to be in a backup car and go to the back. So he's got that 29th position. Again, I'll take a GPP play. Hendrick's been really fast lately. They've been, you know, they're kind of on a roll. So I'll take it. I think he's going to be even lower owned than Newman just because of the experience here. Or sorry, he's starting 22nd. My bad, I'm in the wrong column. And he didn't really show. So it's definitely a GPP play. Going to be underweight, but I don't mind throwing him in a couple. You know, if you're doing a throwing in Jimmy or a Bowman, pairing him with Byron helps to differentiate that Bowman ownership a little bit there as well. And then Kyle Larson as well. And a couple of notes, just listen to the radio this morning, especially about Kyle Larson. He's going to be in a backup car. He is starting, so that made me, he is starting 15th. So that almost had me looking at his flat track performance. I wanted to fade him just because of that information there, because you start looking at these flat tracks, 37th, 18th, got a couple top 10s, 37th. Very up and down, just like his season. So the other thing that swayed me was just listening to the radio this morning. He was on the radio doing an interview, I believe it was yesterday, and he was just talking about being on the bubble for the playoffs. This is something I want to bring in here. The standings right now, looking at driver averages, looking at the standings. So 16 make it into the playoffs. We got 7 races left. If you got a win, you're in. So anyone without a win is going to be racing for points. So we're looking at, with the stage points this season, you're going to have drivers like Kyle Larson had talked about. They're not going to, take a lot of risks and push it to try and get that win. They're more looking at getting stage points, stage 1, stage 2. You see a lot of drivers that will go in and pit before the pits are closed with 2 laps to go before the end of stage 1 and stage 2, just to try and get some track position and put themselves in a better position to be there at the end of the race to win the race, which is, the drivers that already have wins, they're going for more wins because those playoff points are huge. But drivers that are looking for just general points, which are your 2nd to 10th place in the first 2 stages, and then obviously your 1st to 10th in, at the end of the race, those drivers are going to maybe be looking for strategy to get points versus trying to win the race. So I'm looking at some of those guys. Start here at Kyle Larson. Doesn't have a win. William Byron's another one, so that kind of makes me feel even more underweight on him. But you got Kyle Larson here. So 16th, Eric Jones is right on the bubble. Ryan Newman right below him. Daniel Suarez, Stenhouse, and then you got Boyer up here and Jimmy Johnson. Just something to think about with those guys. So the guys that maybe haven't shown, top speed, like they have a winning car, like obviously a win would be huge because they're locked into the playoffs, right? But if they don't really have a winning car, they're showing like 10th to 15th to even 20th place speed, they're definitely going to be, their strategies are going to be to get those stage points, as many points as they can to stay above that bubble. So keep that in mind when you're breaking it down. I'm just going to move this back out of the way. So let's look at Jimmy Johnson. We talked about him. He's 8th in the model just because he's been good at New Hampshire. He's one of the, I believe there's 5 or 6 drivers. Let's just go have a look here. Career track history, and we will sort by wins. All veteran drivers. Every single one of these drivers has got like 10 to 15 to 20 years experience in the Cup Series when it comes to winning here. Break down even further, you got Boyer and Logano with 2. So that's why experience on these tougher tracks is key when you're looking for someone with upside and winning upside and stuff. So definitely looking at that there. I'm going to go look at some more questions here. Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Jerry, for joining me. Truex taking the win. That's a good call, JP. He's been absolutely amazing. That's something I actually wanted to look at that I had on my list. So just give me a second here. I'm going to bring this up because he has led a ton of laps. He hasn't got that win here at New Hampshire yet, but he has been dominant from a fantasy point perspective. Top 10s in 4 straight, top 5s in 3 straight, and let's just go look at the laps led. 83, 112, 137, 141, 123. He knows how to get out front. As you can see, those laps led in those races, and this is the last 5 races at New Hampshire. He's been the lap leader in most of those. Kyle Busch has been up there as well, starting from 3rd, 2nd, 1st, 5th, 2nd. So that makes me, when looking at Dominator, especially at this track, tough to pass. And with 2 of the fastest cars on track with Brad Keselowski and Kyle Busch starting on the front row, I think we're going to see – I'm almost leaning, I think, with the stage race and the way it's going to change a little bit, I think that both of these drivers have a chance to get 100-plus laps led. It's interesting to see who's going to get out front first. Like I said in my Roto Pros video yesterday, during final practice, the NBC telecast looked at, in a graph form, laps. I think it was all the way up to 25 laps in their run. They were running 25-lap runs kind of right in that same time. They were like neck and neck with lap times for the first 14, 15 laps. And at that point, Brad Keselowski's car had fallen off quite a bit more than Kyle's. And I would say, I'm not sure how many tenths. I don't have the picture up in front of me right now. I shared that in the chats as well. So definitely check that out. But so looking at that long run speed, it was important because you don't really see that in my ranks here. Kyle was 2nd in 10 lap averages, Keselowski was 3rd. But that's just something that I watched them, really break down on TV, and that just showed me that Keselowski's car maybe falls off. So I can see Keselowski getting out front, leading early. But you look at it here, they're very close in those 10-lap averages. I think Kyle can get out front and lead as well. I think Kyle's my number one dominator. He's more expensive than Keselowski, so I think he's going to be lower owned there as well, especially on FanDuel. It's a $2,500 gap there, so I definitely like that. I think Kyle could come a little bit cheaper than Keselowski, but I'm really torn on which one's going to be higher owned this week. Just going over some questions here. And Boyer. Yeah, Boyer I'm underweight on. All the Stewart-Haas. First of all, they haven't performed this season up to expectations. I do like that he started in 16th. I don't like that he didn't really show much better speed than that. And go start flat. Yeah, he's been good in flats, 3rd at Richmond, 7th at Martinsville, 11th in Phoenix, but the trend has gone down, has gone up there. He hasn't been great at New Hampshire, 35th the last race. Just with other guys in that range, I really like Blaney. I really like Bowman. Boyer's going to be low owned, don't get me wrong. I think he's definitely there, but the 10-lap averages, second practice was 18th, top 10 there. I could see him, I got kind of his upside around, 8th to 14th, somewhere in there. So I could definitely see it. I like it better because of that on FanDuel, where the place differential maybe isn't as big a deal. Harvick or Blaney for FanDuel cash? Well, just because of the okay, let's go Harvick down to Blaney. The $2,500 discount, I'm going Blaney. He's got a very, very fast car. He's been a little bit more consistent recently than Harvick. Harvick's still struggling. I like Harvick from GPP. He's burned a lot of people, so I think Busch and Truex, even Keselowski, with Harvick sandwiched right in there in between, I think he makes a good GPP pivot. He gives us some qualifying. He qualified 14th, giving us some place differential value there. He showed top 5 speed in final practice and 10-lap averages and 1-lap averages. So it looks like he can, he's going to be good off the restarts and have a long-run car, which is very tough to do here. Like you see a guy like Denny Hamlin, he's good. Looks like he's good off the start, but he loses some of that 10-lap average time. So we've got to keep that in mind. Some of the guys are starting with very low air pressures off the restart, and that's just so that they can sustain a long run and have a fast car over 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 lap runs if there's no green flag. So that's going to hurt them off the start. So definitely something to think about there as well. I feel like I'm going to be overweight on Bowman and Dillon. Yeah, talked about Bowman a lot. Pretty self-explanatory. Started in 37th. We didn't talk about Austin Dillon yet. I love it at 6,900, 7,300 on FanDuel. Started 21st. He was 15th in practice 2, 17th in 10-lap averages, and then got a little bit better in the final practice, 11th and then 13th. So I think he's got a 10th to 15th place car, and at that price, I really like it. And we start going back and looking at his results from New Hampshire. Why is that not loading? Technical difficulties. There we go. So his last races here, 21st, 19th, 15th, 16th, 13th, 22nd, 8th, 11th, 14th. He's been very consistent here and had, just let me jump across here. Yeah, starting 21st. So he's starting right kind of in line with where he started here pretty much throughout his career. And he's finished better than that 21st starting position all but once, and it was a 22nd. So at his price, absolutely love it. One of my top value plays. And then while we're staying in the value play range, actually, let's go look at Austin while we're on Austin Dillon. We'll look at his flat track performance. 15th best in the series. Absolutely love it. 6th at Richmond, 11th at Martinsville, 21st at Phoenix. And then last year in the playoffs, he was 8th at Phoenix. Had some trouble at Martinsville, finishing 30th, but then he was 6th at Richmond, 21st here last year. And like I said, that was his second worst finish in 8 career races here, so not too concerned. So he's giving you fantasy points, especially this year. You can compare flat track performance this year versus last year if you think there's a real big difference in the package that they're using. Or you can just look at it overall there as well. So sticking with the value play thing, Austin Dillon is right there as one of my top values, 100%. joining him is Chris Buescher again. 7,100, 7K on FanDuel. I love it that he's starting 25th this week. And I'm just going to look at his flat track averages here. He's been very consistent lately as well, which I like to see. Buescher. So yeah, he's down here a little bit. You can see top 20s in, or top 22nd or better in 5 straight flat tracks. Last year was a bit of trouble. Good to see at the end of last year he really picked it up on the flat tracks, and he's been consistent there. He's not. I don't think he's going to give you much place differential. I don't see him being much better than like an 18th place car type thing. So I think I like him a little bit more in FanDuel, but just at his price, he's him and Dylan. You could put those two drivers together. The cost is not going to be very much whatsoever on either site, and it allows you to go up and grab 2 of these top tier guys, or just go completely balanced with the rest of your lineup in here and have a really good lineup, especially on FanDuel when you're looking for that finishing position. If you can get the other 3 drivers, all top 5s with the winner in there, with Buescher and Dylan, who, say they're both inside the top 20 at the end of the race, 15th to 20th, I think you got a really good lineup there, really good balanced lineup. And if you go those 2 and you add one more cheap guy, which we'll talk about some cheap guys here in a second, I think you can really go stars and scrubs and like get a Kyle Busch and Keselowski stack in there. That's kind of the way I'm looking at it. So Dylan and Buescher are by far my top 2 values plays this week. Other value plays that I'm looking at, I like Ryan Preece. His price on both sites. He's more of a punt GPP, starting 28th, his first time here in a Cup car. He's from the area. He finished top 5 in his last 2 Xfinity races at this track in last year and in 2017. So there's some positivity there. I think he can pick up a little bit of place differential. I don't see him being better than a 25th place car. But again, he's 6K on DraftKings, 5K on FanDuel. So we got Bubba Wallace. The price is down there, sub 6K on DK, only 4,000 on FanDuel. So really good punt play there, I think. Starting 27th, and we want to go, just look at his performance. Definitely not someone I would use in cash. I like Dylan and Buescher if you're playing cash games today as my value plays. When I start going below those guys, it's more GPP punt plays. So he's raced here once last year. Started 27th, finished 24th. You start looking at his flat track averages. Nothing really stands out. 27th, 17th, 10th place at Phoenix in the playoffs, which was good. Last year was kind of a disaster there for him on the flat tracks until that final race at Phoenix there at 10th. But he's been 27th, 17th, 22nd here. So I think he's a top 30 car for sure this week, but he is starting 27th. So you're really looking for that upside for him for GPP. You kind of want him in that 20th range, 20th, 22nd, somewhere in there. He did show a little bit better speed. 26th in practice 2, 16th in 10-lap averages, which was good to see. There was only, I think, 22 cars in those 10-lap averages, but that was good to see. And then 28th, so the 1-lap speed is about right where he's starting, but then 23rd in 10-lap averages when there's 28 drivers that ran those. So just at his price, again, I don't. If he doesn't have mechanical issues or get in a crash, hit the wall, anything like that, I think he's a really good value, especially on FanDuel if he finishes between 20th to 25th this week. Even right at his at 4K, it's going to allow you to go up and pay for 2 or 3 drivers with huge upside. Corey LaJoie stands out as well as a punt if you want to go, same price as Bubba on FanDuel, a little bit cheaper on DraftKings. Again, not a guy we're looking for a ton of upside from. I was kind of wishing he started a little bit farther back than 29th, like in the 30s is where I'm looking for these guys to start. So really makes a GPP when you're talking about LaJoie, Wallace, and Priest in 27th, 28th, and 29th starting positions. But LaJoie here has finished, going back to the start of 2017, 31st in the first race in 2017, and then 27th place in the last 2 races. So I don't think there's upside there. I don't think he's got a very low probability of finishing top 25. He's kind of in that 25th to 30th place range. But again, it's a punt play, and if you were to I maybe don't like risking 2 punts, like going like LaJoie and Wallace and Priest, those guys that are starting inside the top 30 that we're not really expecting like top 25 finishes from. I don't like pairing 2 of them together. Maybe if you're doing more than 20 laps, 50, getting up into the 100, 150 maxes contests, if you're doing that many, I would definitely consider doing some double punts. But if you're doing the 3 maxes, 20 max, there's a lot of risk in doing that with some of these lower end drivers. I'd rather go like one of them and then jumping up to a Dillon or Busher, or both of them, a Newman, a Suarez, and then just start climbing up from there rather than risking it with 2 of those guys just because they're starting inside the top 30. If LaJoie was starting 33rd, C. Wallace 31st, somewhere outside the top 30, I would be more inclined to pair 2 of them together, but I just think there's a lot of risk them starting top 30, and they just, let's just go look at all 3 of them here on the season. So you got LaJoie, average finish 25.3, 25.7 for Wallace, and 23.8 for Priest. So they're just a little bit better average finish for the season overall. I mean, that's looking at a bunch of different track types, different packages that they've run, current form. Also, we've got LaJoie at 25.8. We've got Wallace at 23, which is better. Priest has been down a little bit. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at those punt plays. Again, just going back, Busher and Dillon are my top values down here at the bottom. And then Priest, Wallace, and LaJoie are kind of like my punt range, the guys that I'm looking at. I'm going to go look at some more questions here. I've been on a bunch of other screens. Yeah, so we talked about Dillon, talked about Boyer, Blaney for cash. New to DK, can someone explain a Bowman starting at the back, how this place differential works? Place differential, he's starting 37th. If he wins the race, he gets 36 bonus points, 37 minus 1, because he's starting at the back. I'm not going to really get into some of the other weeks where if they go to the back, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. I believe next week might be one of those impound races where things change a little bit, but pretty much place differential, just like I said. But if you're starting first and finish 37th, so on the pole, Brad Kozlowski, he crashes first lap, finishes 37th, he's getting a minus 36 points on top of whatever his finishing position is. So he's going to finish with negative points. So it's either a plus or a negative. So DraftKings is worth more than FanDuel, so I look for place differential a little bit more on DraftKings versus FanDuel. I'm looking for finish position is like key, and leading laps, finishing all the laps. Obviously, you get points there as well. So that's just kind of the way I'm looking at that. Eric Almirola, I think he's a driver that's maybe starting ahead of kind of how fast his car actually is. Not even just how fast his car is. He was 3rd in practice 2, but he was 19th in 10-lap averages. Picked it up a little bit lost a little bit of short run speed, 7th in practice 3, a little bit better in 10-lap averages, but I just did not really feeling it this week for Almirola. It's been pretty good. He's got a lot of top 5s, 4 top 5s in his last 7 races here, or not here, but on the flat track. So not too bad there, but I just like other drivers a little bit more. I would like him, if he was in that 16th where Boyer is and stuff. I'm not really on the Stewart-Haas cars this week. They haven't really shown me, like Harvick, when he's shown that he's had a fast car, he's maybe led some laps, and that was at some of those aero tracks that we've talked about in the 1.5 miles. He hasn't closed the deal. And to me, he's the top driver on that team. He's the one that I'm really looking at because he is showing that top 5 speed, it seems like, week after week. He's been good here. He's been good on the flat tracks. But Boyer and Almirola are 2 drivers. Even though Almirola is 4th in my model, I would use him. I'll put it this way. I'm not using him at all on DraftKings because of the place differential thing. I'm using him more on FanDuel because if he finishes 8th or 9th, I think his value is a lot more on FanDuel than it is going to be to you on DraftKings today. Ty Dillon or Hemrick GPP? Definitely going to go with Ty Dillon on that. They're starting like right there, but Ty didn't even show the better speed. But I'm just feeling Ty Dillon. I personally don't have either of any, but I do feel Ty Dillon over Hemrick, even though Hemrick's speed's been a little bit better. I'm going with experience here, and Ty Dillon has that experience at this track versus rookies at this very tough track in a Cup car. It's going to be a workout for them. That comes down to Priest as well. I mean, he was good here in the Xfinity Series a bit, but it's the same thing. It's a rookie in the Cup Series at a tough track. gonna want to fade them for the most part. That comes to these two, Terrio and Seuss, definitely fading them. Quinn Houff, Matt Tiff, definitely staying away from those guys. I want experience here at this track, if at all possible. Stenhouse in cash. Stenhouse starting 11th in cash games on DraftKings, I think, is not good at all. He hasn't shown better speed than that, especially in 10-lap averages. Didn't even get a 10-lap run in final practice. Doesn't look like – I don't get any notes on him. I didn't get to hear his radio or communications or anything. But 21st in the only 10-lap average run that he had in the final two practices, that's a no-no for me. He's been good on the aero tracks this year, but when it comes to flat tracks, see how far down he is here. 2 top 15s in the last 10 races, and he's starting 11th. He hasn't finished better than his starting position at any flat track, and he's going to give you a ton of negative place differential if he finishes where he has been on the flat track. So he's an all-out fade for me this week. I've got no Stenhouse even in GPPs. Menard. Yeah, we haven't talked about Menard yet. And for some reason, I can't find him here. Yeah, top 20s in his last 3 flat tracks this season. So with this little bit of a change, which is a little bit better, a little bit more of an upgrade where we seen him last year. So I definitely like that. To go over here and just look at where he ranks. He's 20th. He's top 20 in my overall ranking, starting 17th. So definitely looking at Menard. Sorry, I had a little bit of a glitch there. He's not showing a bunch better speed than the starting position, so more GPP. I wouldn't play him in cash. But yeah, he's definitely live as a GPP play. He's going to be low owned, I think, just because of Dillon and Buscher right there. So I don't mind that pivot at all for like 5% ownership if they're going to be like 10 to 15. Jimmy Johnson, yeah. So I definitely like the Hendrick cars. Talked about Bowman. I haven't talked about Elliott either. Talked about Byron. He's in a backup car, so I'm a little concerned there that he didn't show better speed. But, GPP play. Jimmy Johnson's 8th in my model, starting 10th. He's been good here over his career. He's been good on the flat tracks. Bring it up here. 12th, 24th, and 8th this year. Look at last year. And keep this in mind, Jimmy Johnson struggled last year. It was an absolutely terrible year. But he finished top 15 at every single short flat track with top 10s at Richmond, New Hampshire, and Richmond again. So I definitely like Jimmy Johnson this week. I like him a lot more. Starting 10th, I like him a lot more on FanDuel. That's where I would get most of my exposure. But I'll still have some shares of him on DraftKings as well. But, I'd be like 80% FanDuel, 20% DK on him. Okay, I'm sure I missed a few here. Does Matt D tire issue have effect on the other JGR cars? No, he was the only one that really showed that issue, and that's another full fade for me this week. I love seeing all that speed out of him, but here's the thing. He did have those tire issues. He blew two tires in final practice, like one right after they repaired the car. A little bit of damages. They said it was okay. They interviewed him. He said, yeah, looks like they did some good repairs. There should be no problem. Got out in the track, couple laps in, blew another tire. So he's got that issue going for him. Whether they fix it or not, they've been able to work on the car. He's starting 7th. He's finished, just going to bring up some stats here. That's what I do. I'm Mr. Stat, so I can't do anything with those stats. His starts here at New Hampshire. 28th, 31st, 30th, 28th, 31st, 30th, 35th. The last 3 were in the 32 car, 30th, 31st, and 28th. So he's never finished better than 28th. He's finished there twice. Those are his only top 30 finishes. 30th, 3 top 30 finishes. And then we start looking at his season. Even, let's look at his career. He's got 1 top 5 in his entire career, and it was this season. I believe it was, Sonoma, on a road course. Not, being that he's got 1 top 5 finish in his entire career, he's in 6 races, he's never finished better than 28th here at this track, and he's got that tire issue. That's 3 strikes you're up. He's definitely going to be a fade for me this week. Okay, let's go answer some more questions here. Why Blaney and Cash? Blaney and Cash, especially on FanDuel, I don't even mind it because he's got a mid 8K price tag there. He's got 10K on FanDuel. He's starting 5th. He's got top 5 speed. He's been arguably the fastest car on track all weekend. If there's anyone that I think can challenge Kyle Busch and Brad Keselowski for laps led today, it's Ryan Blaney. He's 5th in P2, which is, these are Saturday. P2 and P3 are Saturday practices. Those are the only ones I look at. Practice 1 on a normal weekend like this, drivers, teams, they are working on qualifying setup to get a good qualifying run. Practice 2 and 3, they are working on race setup. So I really break down that data more than anything. Top 5, so he's got his 1 lap speed in the second practice was the same as the starting position. But then he was 2nd in 10 lap average. He goes into final practice, he's the fastest car on track, 1 lap, 5, 10, 15. He's right up there as one of the fastest cars on track this week. That's why I like him on Cash. I wouldn't use him on Cash necessarily on DraftKings just because you've got Alex Bowman and that place differential right there and some other ways to go. But on FanDuel, where it's, finishing position is king, I'm looking at, I'm not playing cash games personally, but pairing Blaney with Kyle Busch or Brad Keselowski and working around that core for cash games. If no Blaney in GPP, who would you pivot to? So in GPP, I mean, you could go to Bowman. He's going to be really high owned. Like I said, in GPP, you're really looking for those pivots. But like I said, even if Bowman has a bad day, finishes 20th, he's giving you 17 bonus points with a top 20 finish. So I definitely think he's going to be a good play, but he should be really high owned. Eric Jones, I think, now becomes a good play, a pivot off those guys. He's starting up front, first of all, so a lot of people, DraftKings, are going to absolutely avoid him because of the place differential. He hasn't been great here, as you can see, but he's shown a ton of speed. He was the fastest car on track in that first practice on Saturday, second practice overall, and then he was, a little bit slower in final practice, 12th, and then he's still top 10 speeds. I like it a little bit more on FanDuel, especially the price here. As you can see, he's cheaper than, he's a little bit lower priced on FanDuel. Not a lot to do with him not being, a guy that you're looking at as a dominator driver, but he's one I would pivot to for sure. Talked about Boyer as a deeper GPP play. He's starting 16th, so he does give you that little bit of place differential, but he didn't show a ton more speed better than that. And I talked about Stewart-Haas. I'm definitely looking at the Hendrick, Penske, and JGR cars, not necessarily in that order, but before Stewart-Haas drivers when I'm making my lineups today. Chastain or LaJoie, I'm going LaJoie. Just kind of flipping through, make sure I didn't miss anything. Got someone saying I did Kyle Busch, Blaney, Bowman, Almirola, Buescher on the FanDuel. Yeah, Almirola, that's definitely going to be a FanDuel only play for me, so I definitely like that. Had a kid beating on the dog, so I had to take care of that. She sent her down to the bedroom. Sorry about that. Yeah, Almirola I talked about being a lot better on FanDuel, and then mixing him with Kyle Busch, Blaney. Bowman gives you that place differential value at his price. Almirola gives you that 8th to 12th place finish. I think he's all right there for his price as well. And then your last guy was Buescher. Talked about him as my favorite value play, him and Austin Dillon. So I like it. Priest or Tift in cash, neither in cash. Like talked about, both rookies on a tough track. I'm not risking either of them in cash games. I'm not, like I said, not playing cash games, but it's a lot riskier when you're talking about drivers without experience in a cup car on this tough flat track. Make sure I didn't miss any here. So would you go 13 over 95 on FanDuel? Let's just look at it a little bit closer. On FanDuel, yeah, I'm definitely going to go Ty Dillon. I think he's 15th to 20th place car, and I think, to be honest, I think Matt DiBenedetto at the end of the day is going to be a 15th to 20th place car at best. So I'm definitely Ty Dillon over DiBenedetto there. Would start in 3 top 10 guys. Or yeah, there's definitely. Let's look at the correlation here quick. I know there's only been one driver to win from the pole in the last 6 races. That's Kyle Busch. Only 2 drivers have started from the top 10. You start looking at the correlation down here between starting and finishing position. You got 0.6, 0.5, 0.483, 0.786. So it's one of the higher tracks when you're talking about correlation of starting up front. Track position's huge, but a lot of that info from the older days wasn't the stage racing, and stage racing gives the opportunity, another opportunity for crew chiefs to strategize and get their drivers track position without having to, make a really, really bold call like they would have had to in the past, like pitting early on a green flag run or staying out late and hoping for a caution, stuff like that. They don't got to take as many big risks to get that track position now. With the stage racing, you can start doing a little bit more strategy. So I do think it is key. Like, we've got drivers that started top 10 to finish top 10. We've got the last 6 races. We've got 5, 6, 6, 6, 4, a little bit lower there, 6. So there's going to be a lot of drivers starting top 10. They're going to finish there because this is a very tough track to pass. Even with the PJ1 compound, it's still going to be a tough track to pass, which that tells me restarts are going to be crazy. When it's tough to pass, when you get in a long green flag run, you're going to see drivers get very aggressive off the restarts to get that track position. This also adds more variance, as I think we're going to see some wrecks. If you watch practice at all, turn 3, I talked about this earlier in the video, but turn 3 is treacherous. It's got the bumps, the PJ1 a little bit high. So if you're on the high side of the outside, going into turn 3, right in that braking zone, you've got those bumps. I think we're going to see 1 or 2, maybe even 3 drivers hit the wall there. We've seen it in practice, pretty much every practice this weekend. So I think we're going to see some variance in that as well this week. So, I mean, experience is key. I can't stress that enough here at this track. Kurt Busch, possible dominator? No. I listened to Kurt Busch's radio. Even though he showed some speeds here, like he's qualified 3rd. Terrible second practice. He was 21st, 12th and 10 lap averages. Figured it out a little bit in final practice, which is positive to see that he jumped up to 14th in 1 lap times, 7th and 10 lap averages. I just don't see that as a dominator when you're looking at Kyle Busch, who's had top 5 speed all weekend. Brad Keselowski's had top 5 speed all weekend. Ryan Blaney's been one of the fastest cars in the track, consistent the whole weekend. You could even throw Martin Truex Jr. and Kevin Harvick in there as well with their top 5 speeds and practices. Consistent speed throughout the entire weekend. So I don't think, and then you add in that Kurt Busch hasn't been as good here as those drivers that I talked about. I don't think, he may lead 5 to 10 laps because of a green flag pit stop of other drivers, or 2 tires on a pit stop to get out front early and lead a few laps in a run on a restart or at the start of a new stage. But I do not think that he's going to be one of those drivers that leads for dominators with 301 laps in this race. I'm really looking for 50 plus. If I can get a driver that's 100 plus, I think there's maybe going to be 2 or 3 that lead 50 plus. I don't think he's one of those drivers. Jones better than Kurt. Kurt's been better here. He's got more experience, obviously. Jones is a young driver, 3rd season now. So no, he hasn't been as good here. Kurt's been better on the flats. I'm just feeling Eric Jones is a GPP play. I think Eric Jones has more potential to lead some laps, just because he's actually showed that top speed. Like I said, in practice too, he was fastest in 1 lap, and then he was fastest in 10 lap. And I believe they pulled this up on the screen during that practice. He was tops in 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 lap runs. So he had a very fast car. They lost a little bit. They made some adjustments in final practice, but I think he's got more potential to lead laps. On DraftKings, with the experience, I'd probably lean Kurt Busch a little bit looking at things overall. But on FanDuel, a $2,000 discount, it's Eric Jones for me all day. Jeremy wants me to look at his lineup. We got Newman, Buescher, Kyle Busch, Blaney, and Hamlin. I have 0 Hemrick. But back to Jeremy's lineup here. You need salary, so I'm not really understanding. Oh, you've only got 5 drivers there. My least favorite of the higher price guys is Hamlin. I like Blaney and Kyle Busch more than Hamlin. I do like Hamlin, don't get me wrong. Like I said, GPP play starting 23rd, but he is coming from the back of the field. And for anyone that have maybe missed the start of the video, there's 5 cars in backup. or 5 drivers in backup cars this week. You got Ryan Newman and Denny Hamlin. They hit the wall, went to backup in opening practice. Alex Bowman went to a backup in qualifying and broke a drive shaft. He also wrecked his backup car in final practice. They had to use Jimmy Johnson's number 48 backup car as their 3rd car of the weekend. So that's why he started in 37th as well. And then you got William Byron and Kyle Larson, who are also in backup cars. So all of those drivers, if you're playing the place differential thing, they're scored for fantasy where they are listed on the sheet in this column, but they will start from the back. So, for example, for anyone that missed it, Denny Hamlin is starting 23rd officially, but he's starting from the back of the pack. I'm not sure. I think he's like 36th. So in that case, he's starting with a -13 place differential. But like I said, he's shown top 10 speed, so he's a driver that I think can finish top 10 or even 10th to 15th, which is going to give you that +8 place differential at the end of the race. But because he's starting from the rear and not getting a fantasy start from the rear, starting 23rd, I think that makes him a good GPP play. The other guy in that range are with that narrative is Ryan Newman, starting 26th, but going to the rear of the field as well. Byron right below him, 22nd. That's a little more risky, starting to start a little bit more up front, so you're adding more risk. Plus, you're adding more risk because Newman and Hamlin have a heck of a lot more experience overall and at this track than Byron does. So that's why I'm leaning those two in that situation. I talked about fading Kyle Larson just because, one, he is starting 15th, so even further up. He does have some experience. He's been up and down. He's actually been pretty good here. Flat tracks, he's been a little bit up and down compared to other guys that are cheaper than him. And he talked about capitalizing on getting as many points as possible for that playoff line versus taking risks and trying to win the race. I want a guy that's going to try and win the race. So I'm definitely looking to fade Larson because of all that information put together. Oh, Bowman could definitely get caught up in traffic, but he's got a car that can easily finish top 20. And, I mean, it's a long race. You've got stages. There's probably going to be, let's say there's a caution in the first stage. That's a chance for him to stay out and gain some spots. Then we've got the end of stage 1. That gives him a chance to go up and gain some spots, some strategy on pit road to get him a little bit of but he's also going to be faster than, let's just go look at Bowman overall here. Showing top 20 speed, he should easily be able to pass, say, 10, 15 cars quite easily. Then things get a little bit more challenging. And then, like I said, with the stage, at the end of the day, him getting up inside the top 20, I think he can get up inside the top 20 by, like, maybe not the end of stage 1, but before the end of stage 2, I think he can get up inside the top 20. He's been fairly good here. He has been great on flat tracks. But even a 25th place finish at the end of the day gives you 12 place differential, which is going to give him a ton more points per dollar value than Eric Jones starting 4th. If Eric Jones even finishes 5th, just that place differential value just makes up for that. So that's why we're really looking at Bowman this week. And yeah, he could get caught up in traffic. It could take him a lot longer to get up front, being that it's a very tough track to pass. Now, it's a very tough track to pass. Getting from the back of the pack to 15th isn't as difficult because you're a lot faster than those cars. But once you get inside that top 15, that's when the passing really gets hard because all the cars become a lot closer together, looking at the teams and the setups and just the talent of the drivers, the talent of the team, the money that they put into their cars and into their programs is a lot more of the guys that consistently run outside the top 15, top 20. Bowman is a car that is a top 15 car in the season, arguably top 10 car this season. So he's got the talent, he's got the equipment to easily get inside the top 20. So that's why I've really come around on using him. In some of my lines, I'm definitely going to pivot away and go Jones, Blaney, Boyer a little bit on FanDuel, maybe some Almirola, just to try and differentiate and not hope he crashes. I never want to say I hope he crashes, but in the case that he crashes early, finishes 30th to 35th, somewhere in there, outside the top 30, has more trouble because he hasn't practiced with that car. I think that's a good way to go as a GPP pivot because he's going to be so high owned. So if he finishes outside the top 30, he's 70% owned, and you're one of the 30% without him. Well, you just eliminate 60% of the field in that tournament. You've got a lot better chances of cashing. 78 to spend on DK, not sure who to take. Suarez starting 13th is definitely GPP. Ryan Newman, I like I said, starting 26th, even though he's starting at the back of the pack because he's in a backup car. Like I said, he's a top 15 car for me with his experience at this track, flat tracks. I think he can get up there. 15th to 20th is enough for him to hit value. So those are my two favorites. Go down further, I mean, you're leaving money on the table, which I have no problem with. Not as much as that track as, say, like Daytona, where you can leave thousands on the table. But you got Buescher and Dillon, who I talked about as well. So FanDuel cash, Busch, Blaney, Bowman, Buescher, and Newman. Yeah, I think that you got a chance at your dominator with Kyle Busch. Another possible dominator I talked about with Ryan Blaney. So you got two of my three favorite dominator potentials. You've got Bowman, who gives you that place differential upside, which maybe isn't as important on FanDuel, but it's still going to give you those extra added points. And like I said, I think he's a top 20 car. Like, if he finishes better than top 20, if he gets 10th to 15th, that's an excellent day considering what they've gone through this weekend. But if he finished 20th and he gets those extra bonus points, I think that makes sense, especially for his price. Helps you out. And then you get to Newman as well. Newman seems a little more GPP for me, so I maybe wouldn't run him on cash on FanDuel. I'd maybe go a different direction, possibly. Maybe like a Suarez in cash starting 13th because I think he's, 10th to 15th place car versus Newman's a little bit more riskier starting at the back of the pack. Even if he finishes 20th, that's only 6th place differential. FanDuel gives you a lot less for that, so your points are going to be down. It's not going to make up for Daniel Suarez at a 10th to 12th to 15th place finish. So I would maybe go Suarez over Newman on FanDuel there. On DK, I would definitely lean Newman. But again, I'm not playing cash. Now, I don't have, Jason, I'm looking at yours here. I don't have Brad as a 7. The model looks at 20% form, 20% flat track average of the last 2 years, 25% track history here at New Hampshire. And as you can see, Keselowski is ranked lower than a lot of other guys around him. So that contributes to that as well. His practice speed, which was second fastest average of the final 2 practices, is not the same as Kyle Busch. It's only a half ranking worse. But he's third to, we've got Blaney there as well. So the practice didn't quite make up for his, you can go in and make your own models. If I was to adjust this model, and if you do that, just go up to File, make a copy, name it whatever you want, just click OK. It's going to allow you to edit it then. So what you can then do is you can come and change all this. Like if you were to take out, who cares about form? I really want flat track average. Not that much, obviously. That changes it. That moves them up to 6th. And then, if you put your model at career track history, you go flat tracks. And the point is you can just change this around to pretty much whatever you want. It's going to change the ranking. So I'm just going to go back to where I was, where I'm comfortable with. So that's another reason why I lean Kyle, because he hits on more things than Keselowski does. He hits on the practice, he hits on the track history, he hits on the flat track average, and he hits on the form. So he just checks more boxes, and that's what the model looks at, is a percentage of all of these things. And you can go in, you can adjust that. Like I said, if you want to go adjust that, definitely. I advise people, reach out to me if you want to start making your own models, custom models. Bowman, yeah, talked about Bowman. Kind of beating a dead horse here. Starting 37th, kind of feels like a free spot on DraftKings because of the place differential. You're getting 17 place differential bonus points if he even finishes 20th. So that does feel like a free space somewhat. Not as much on FanDuel where the place differential isn't as much. And like I said, I don't mind doing a GPP pivot off of him in the case that he struggles in a car that he hasn't even got in and drove yet. And already had troubles on the weekend as well, finishes outside the top 30, you're golden. if he finishes outside the top 30 and you've pivoted off him in GPPs. So going to wrap things up here. Went over pretty much the whole field. I think I answered all the questions. If not, fire them away now. Going to be a couple more minutes here. I'll just kind of wait around if there's any more coming in for this. Just kind of going over, checking all the chats, Twitter, to see if there's any questions, anything else I maybe haven't covered yet. And after this is over, I will be building lineups. You can get the, you can hit me up in the Roto Pros members chat room, the DFSR members chat room, or on Twitter at Jaeger_bombs9 with anything I maybe didn't discuss in this video. If you have questions about the sheet, if you have questions about making the model, definitely get in there and you know, hammer away with the questions, because we got about, I'm just going to check things over here. Things have been crazy. I forget what lock. I believe it's 3 p.m. Eastern. Double check on that for you. Yeah, 3 p.m. Eastern is lineup lock today. That's 1 p.m. where I'm at, Mountain Time at the moment. So we've got 2 hours to lineup lock. Let's go build some lineups and get some green screens this week. Oh, pick one, please. Okay, I'll wait here. Pick one of Suarez, Almirola, Newman as a safe cash player on FanDuel. Again, handing out cash information is tough because I don't play a lot of cash. I just, in high variance sport like this, I really don't like playing cash games. I'd rather play GPPs and construct my lineups that way. You've got 3 pretty good options here. I'd rank Newman 3rd for cash games. Suarez showed, you know, top 10 car, like I said. So I think he hits value somewhere in the 8th to 12th, 13th place finish area. Almirola starting a little bit more, showed a little bit more speed, but I'm just not feeling Almirola this week. He hasn't been as good here. So I'd probably go Suarez. Suarez, Almirola, Newman. So Suarez would be my answer there, Jeremy. Bush or Truex? I'm Bush this week. Almost, sorry, not 100%, but I'm overweight. So if you think he's going to be 60% on, I'm going to have 70%. If you think he's going to be 70% on, I'm going to have 80%. I don't think he's going to be that high in GPP. Probably 60%, 50 to 60% is probably, depending on the contest, is probably where I'm at with him. So if I'm building 10 lineups, he's in 7. If I'm building 20, he's in 14. I'd like to go heavy on that. And like I discussed in the Roto Pros video yesterday, I like building my GPP lineups with a core construction. So one that I had looked at was Kyle Busch, one of Austin Dillon or Buescher, and Ryan Blaney. So Busch, Blaney, let's just say Busch, Blaney, and Austin Dillon. Fit those 3 in my lineup, and if I'm building 14 Kyle Busch lineups out of my 20, I'm probably going to use that core in about 6. And then once I build those 6 lineups, switching in the other 3 drivers with that core, I'm going to keep Kyle Busch in my core, and I'm going to put Buescher in. And I'm very confident in Blaney as well, like I said. So I'm going to run a core of now Busch, Blaney, and Buescher, and then make 5, 6 lineups. And then I'm going to switch up the core again. I'm going to keep Kyle Busch in again, but I'm going to not use any of those drivers. I'm going to get Blaney out of there, and I'm going to go with 2 other guys. That's kind of the way I'm going to go about building. I like Eric Jones, like I said, for GPP. I think he's going to help you differentiate yourself in those lineups because the other cores are going to be a little bit more. And then what I'll do, and you know, let's just say for 20 lineups, just for numbers' sake, and I want 50% exposure to Kyle Busch right off the bat, I'm going to build 10 lineups, obviously, with Kyle Busch. I'm going to have 5 with one core, 5 with another core, and then the rest of my exposure, because I said I want 70%, I want 14 lineups, I'm going to run, obviously, a different core. So say that other core is Keselowski, Dillon, and Blaney. Then I'm going to have Kyle Busch as a fill-in 4 more times in those other 10 lineups. I know it's a little bit complicated. Definitely reach out if you're not quite understanding how to build these multi-entry, but that's how I'm going to go about getting my 70% exposure to Kyle Busch. And I'll do that, and I'll kind of make a plan for each and every driver so that you don't get caught up. It's so easy sometimes with NASCAR building to get caught up in one value driver, and then you get to the end, you got 80% of a value driver that comes with a lot of risk. So I would rather go 70% on a driver like Kyle Busch, who's #1 in my model. He's been good here. He checks off all the boxes. Then go 70% on a guy down here in the bottom range who, not going to give you winning upside, presents a whole bunch more risk. So I like to spread out that exposure. With Kyle Busch, I'm going to have 70% with, and get him with Buescher, Dillon, Menard. We talked about Ryan Preece, Darrell Walsh Jr., Corey LaJoie. I want a mix of all those cheap guys so that when Kyle Busch goes off, Ryan Blaney goes off, they finish 1-2, they both lead 100-plus laps, let's say, you have the best chance of winning the GPP. Mix it in those high variance value guys at the bottom of the salary. So I don't know if that makes a lot of sense. I'm definitely going to go over strategy a little bit more in some strategy videos and actually break it down, showing you visually how I go about doing that. So I'm going to go there. Stop sharing the sheet now. Kind of went over everything here this week. I'm just going to look at some last questions before I take off and go build some lineups. Any thoughts on the 2 new guys? What do you mean by the 2 new guys? I'm not real sure what are you meaning. Terrio and Seuss? I'm not sure if that's what you mean by new guys. If that's what you mean, I've got no, we have zero information on them, first of all. At a very tough track, like I said, in a non-top team, I want no part of it. Neither of them practiced in final practice either. So I'm absolutely not interested in those 2. With all the other drivers that I've talked about already, there's a great selection of value plays mixed in with. I love this week because we've got top guys. We can go stars and scrubs. Heavy at the top. There's a lot of value guys to mix in there that I talked about. If you can multi-enter and not get caught up in that 70% of a value guy type thing. There's a lot of mid-range if you want to build some lineups just going off in the middle and building a more balanced lineup. So I really love this week overall. Elliott, yeah, I didn't really talk about Elliott a whole lot during the whole video, to be honest. He's starting 12th. He's been good here. If we go look at, of course, I've got that screen off now. Just going to go look at Chase Elliott's last few races here. While I'm getting that loaded, I'm just going to look at the flat track performance for Chase Elliott. He's right up there near the top. Overall, he's got an 8.4 average finish in those 10 races, which is fifth best among all drivers, 15th, 2nd, and 14th this season, 5th at New Hampshire last year. So he's definitely got the upside. I talked about liking Hendrick. So GPP, I'm definitely liking Elliott. I probably don't have enough at this point. He's got 1 top 10 in his last 3 races here, but 5th, 11th, and 13th, 34th in his very first race here. But he definitely figured it out, and he's gotten better each and every race at this track. So he's gained that experience, in my opinion. He's in top equipment. Not really talking about him a whole bunch with all the other guys around him, especially you got Hamlin there, who gives you that place differential upside. Although he's starting from the back, you've got Keselowski only a little bit more. Talked about him being a dominator. So I think he could be a little bit lower owned. I like it a lot. Reagan too cheap for starting 20th. No, I kind of looked at Reagan starting 20th. He was 30th speed in second practice, 24th in final practice. He's not shown speed better than that starting position. And we go look at his track history here. He's got a lot of races under his belt at this track, but this is just going back to the start. Let's just go back to the start of 2014. So we'll start at the oldest race first. 25th, 42nd, 18th, 41st, 30th, 32nd, 29th, 29th, 29th. Starting 20th, I want no part of David Reagan. So that looks like all the questions. Again, thank you so much for coming and checking out the video. It keeps growing every single week with the views, the likes, the interaction in the chat is which I like the most. It's very important to get answers to your questions before you go and build your lineups. Can make or break winning a GPP or not, or cashing or not cashing. Very high variance sport. I personally tell people not to follow DraftKings or FanDuel scoring during the race because it changes so much. 1 or 2 drivers makes a green flag pit stop. All of a sudden, you go from winning 20 grand to 0, or you go from 0 to 20 grand. You get all excited. That driver gets back out on track and everything cycles through. You're right back to where you started. I honestly don't check until like 20, 30 laps left in the race to see where I'm at. And that kind of burnt me last week. I preach this all the time in chat. because you're gonna disappoint yourself, or you're gonna get overexcited, or you're gonna get disappointed, and it changes so much throughout the race when it comes to scoring. It's not like following other sports. But what I did was I went and checked my lineup, and sure enough, I was third in the $4 Chrome Horn on DraftKings, just super excited, jumping around like a moron in the living room. And at the end of the day, I ended up like even, or up like, it was like $10 or something like that. So a lot changed with that that final restart there, even the crash that happened just before that. So it's really up to you, depending on, it can definitely be fun following along on your scoring and kind of seeing where things are at. But just keep in mind, if you're not watching the race, that things can be going on. If you just all of a sudden see your drivers go to 33rd, 35th, 37th, 3 of them, just keep in mind that they just could be pitted. Simple things like that. It doesn't mean that someone crashed or anything. I like following either on NASCAR app, or Fox Sports actually has a really good one as well, where you can star your drivers and you can follow those guys in your lineup, where they're at. You can see, if they've crashed, they'll tell you if they've crashed. They've actually got like a Twitter feed connected to the NASCAR one, I believe. Just kind of gives you updates. Or watching on TV, listening on the radio. There's lots of ways to enjoy the race other than just fantasy, and that's just kind of where I got into it, was the racing aspect of it as a fan. And then, of course, as a fantasy person, I just jumped right into that right away, just loving racing. So enough chit chat. Let's go build some lineups. Thanks for liking and subscribing to the channel. Make sure to check out the Roto Pros channel as well. I've got a preview race that I did yesterday, going over a little bit more of the track stuff, PJ1 compound, stuff like that, practice notes. So get over to the Roto Pros YouTube channel as well. Check out that video, like it, subscribe to their channel as well. I do 2 videos a week. I do a race preview with initial picks video for Roto Pros, and then I do this video, which is for DFSR and Roto Pros, the day of the race as a live stream. So thanks for checking it out. Let's go build some lineups. Have a good week, everyone. Cheers.